today we're tackling something that comes up quite a lot, the connection between autism spectrum disorder and ADHD.
Right. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Exactly. It feels like we're hearing more about both conditions and, well, increasingly that they can actually overlap.
Hmm.
So how do we make sense of these conditions? They seem so intertwined, yet, distinct.
That really is the central puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah.
We know the prevalence, the numbers for both have been climbing,
Yeah.
and the number of individuals who actually meet the criteria for both ASD and ADHD is pretty significant.
Right.
So it really begs the question, what's actually going on under the hood?
Exactly. And that's kind of our mission in this deep dive. We want to explore that.
Try to unpack it a bit.
Yeah, look at the shared characteristics, the often complicated path to getting a diagnosis,
Definitely complicated.
and what all that means for treatment. And our guide for this is a really useful piece in current psychiatry reports.
Oh yeah, the Angel and Russo paper from 2019.
That's the one. It gives a great synthesis of where the understanding is right now.
It really does.
So whether you're navigating this personally, maybe supporting someone who is, or you're just fascinated by the intricacies of neurodevelopment, we hope to give you some valuable, clear insights today.
Yeah, and that publication is helpful because it doesn't just list features, it really gets into the nuances of the relationship between them.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's look at what might link these conditions. The paper highlights shared genetic risk factors.
Right.
Now, we know genetics and brain development is rarely simple, but what kind of shared biology are we talking about here?
Well, we're likely looking at overlapping sets of genes, or maybe variations in common pathways, neurodevelopmental pathways.
Right.
It's not like there's a single ASD gene or a single ADHD gene, but the research suggests certain gene families, the ones involved in how the brain develops and functions, might increase susceptibility to either condition or sometimes both.
So kind of like having similar basic blueprints.
Exactly. Like similar foundational blueprints for brain development, but small variations can lead to quite different outcomes.
Interesting. Like different architectural choices maybe, leading to different buildings from similar basic materials.
That's a good analogy, yeah.
So beyond the genetics, the research also points to shared difficulties in social functioning. Now, we all know social interaction challenges are like core to ASD.
Definitely.
But how does ADHD come into play on the social side?
Well, it's a fascinating contrast, actually. With ASD, the social difficulties often stem from challenges in understanding social cues, maybe responding to them.
Right, reciprocity.
Yeah, difficulties with that reciprocal interaction, forming relationships. But with ADHD, the social challenges might look different. They might arise more from impulsivity.
Like interrupting.
Exactly, interrupting, or maybe difficulty sustaining attention during conversations, or sometimes challenges with emotional regulation impacting those social exchanges.
Ah.
So while the end result might be, social difficulty, the pathway to getting there can be quite different.
So two different types of roadblocks on the same social highway. That's actually a really helpful way to picture it. The paper also mentions shared impairments in executive functioning. Can you just remind us quickly, what does executive functioning cover?
Sure. Executive functions are essentially the brain's control center.
Okay.
We're talking about things like planning, organization, working memory is a big one, impulse control.
Right.
And what's striking is that both ASD and ADHD frequently involve deficits, problems in these areas.
So how might that look different day to day?
Okay, so in ADHD, a working memory deficit might mean someone forgets instructions almost immediately, or really struggles to hold multiple pieces of information in their head at once.
Okay.
In ASD, while someone might have a really strong rote memory, like for facts, a working memory challenge could show up differently. Maybe difficulty adapting if a routine suddenly changes, or trouble holding all the steps of a social interaction in mind simultaneously.
Gotcha. So the core deficit might overlap, but how it actually plays out in daily life can be quite distinct.
Precisely.
So we're seeing these interesting points where they meet shared biology, maybe social challenges showing up differently, executive function issues with their own unique expressions. But the paper also really emphasizes phenotypic differences. Remind us what phenotypic means in this context.
Phenotypic just refers to the observable characteristics.
Yeah.
The actual presentation of the condition, how it looks on the surface.
Right.
So despite those underlying overlaps we talked about, the way ASD and ADHD actually look can be quite different.
And these differences are key for diagnosis.
Absolutely.
Mm.
These qualitative differences, the how it looks, not just if it's there, are really what clinicians focus on during diagnosis.
Can you give an example, maybe with attention?
Sure. Think of ADHD focus. It can sometimes seem scattered, maybe like a burst of fireworks, easily drawn to new, interesting things.
Okay.
In contrast, ASD focus can often be more like a laser beam, intensely fixed on particular interests, sometimes really tuning everything else out.
Laser beam versus fireworks. That's actually really helpful.
Both are attentional differences, right? But the nature of that difference is crucial.
Okay. So, with these subtle but significant differences in how things like attention present, it must make diagnosis quite the puzzle, especially if someone might have both.
Oh, absolutely. It's very challenging. Diagnosing either condition relies on the DSM-5 criteria, which gives specific symptom lists.
Right, the diagnostic manual?
Yes, but those are categorical criteria boxes to check, essentially. And real-life presentations can be much more nuanced, especially when both conditions are present.
Because the symptoms overlap so much.
Exactly. That overlap can make it really challenging to figure out if it's a specific difficulty, say, with organization systems, mostly from ASD traits or ADHD traits, or maybe the interaction between the two.
So you can't just look at one symptom in isolation.
No, you really can't.
No.
Disentangling the primary drivers requires a very detailed, very comprehensive assessment, not just a quick checklist.
It sounds like clinicians need to be like detectives, really piecing together a complex picture.
That's a good way to put it.
And if someone does receive a diagnosis of both ASD and ADHD, this comorbidity, how does that change the approach to treatment? It can't just be treating each one separately, right?
No, not at all. That doesn't
Yeah.
usually work very well. The presence of co-occurring ADHD can definitely affect how effective traditional ASD interventions might be.
How so?
Well, for instance, someone with ASD who also has significant hyperactivity might really struggle to participate effectively in, say, a social skills group that requires sitting still and focusing for a long time.
Okay, that makes sense.
And conversely, when you're treating ADHD in someone who also has ASD, you need to be mindful of other things, maybe potential sensory sensitivities or specific social communication nuances. These can influence how they respond to standard ADHD treatments, like stimulant medications or certain behavioral strategies. It's a really delicate interplay.
So it demands a much more integrated approach, tailored to the individual.
Absolutely. Individualized is key.
What might that look like, practically speaking?
Often, it involves a multidisciplinary team working together. You might have psychologists, psychiatrists, occupational therapists, speech therapists.
Right, all collaborating.
Yes, collaborating to create a treatment plan that addresses that person's specific constellation of challenges, not just the labels.
So maybe adapting therapies.
Exactly. Tailoring behavioral therapies to hit both social communication and executive function deficits. Carefully considering medication options, looking at potential interactions, and how well the person tolerates them.
And incorporating other strategies, too.
Yes, strategies to manage maybe sensory issues or emotional regulation difficulties that might be part of the picture. The main thing is moving beyond just the standard protocols for either ASD or ADHD alone and truly personalizing the support system.
Okay. So after navigating all this, the shared roots, the different ways these conditions show up, the diagnostic complexities, the treatment needs, what's the core message from this research? What should we really take away?
I think the fundamental takeaway, despite all the undeniable overlaps we've discussed, genetics, social aspects, executive functions, is that the evidence still strongly supports ASD and ADHD as distinct neurodevelopmental conditions.
Yeah.
They aren't just different points on one single spectrum.
So they warrant separate diagnostic categories.
Yes. While their frequent co-occurrence means we absolutely need careful consideration and integrated approaches when both are present. Recognizing both their similarities and their unique characteristics is crucial. It's vital for accurate identification, for targeting interventions effectively, and ultimately for improving outcomes for people who experience one or both.
That's a really key point. It's not about trying to force people into one box or the other, but understanding the individual complexity while still acknowledging that these separate diagnostic categories have validity.
Precisely. And it really underscores the ongoing need for research, doesn't it? To keep refining our understanding of the underlying mechanisms and developing even more effective, more tailored support strategies down the line.
Okay, so just to quickly recap for everyone listening, we've seen how ASD and ADHD can share some biological roots, and they can both lead to challenges with social interaction and executive functions, although those challenges can look quite different.
Right, the presentation varies.
Diagnosing them, especially when they occur together, requires a really nuanced, thorough approach, not just checking boxes. And effective treatment needs to be integrated, personalized, and really consider that interplay between the ASD and ADHD aspects.
That sums it up nicely, a concise overview of the key insights.
And maybe on that note, here's something to really think about as we wrap up. This increasing understanding we have of the intricate relationship between ASD and ADHD, it just highlights the incredible complexity of neurodevelopment, doesn't it?
It really does.
It's kind of a powerful reminder that the brain is just so nuanced, and our journey to truly understand and support neurodiversity. Well, it's a continuous process, right? A process of learning and adapting how we approach things. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.